Good morning, Toronto. We are going to dive into a conversation that, it's the obsession of almost everybody who lives in this city. It's real estate. It's either too expensive, inaccessible, there's not enough of it, we can't build it fast enough, it's too ugly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we've got a crazy story that a lot of people have been talking about. There's a couple on Oakwood Avenue. Is it Oakwood? That I guess the city was doing some road work, and they accidentally punched through a hole in the sidewalk, which created essentially a skylight into their basement apartment. And originally, the city said that they were going to have to pay for it themselves. There's an update recently that the city of Toronto reached out, and it's welcome news to this family. The statement reads that permanent restoration will occur next week. Since the onset of this unfortunate and unusual situation, Toronto Water has committed to absorbing the cost of all the repair work and engineering support required. So the family is, quote, cautiously optimistic. Despite what sounds like the city waving the white flag, they are cautiously optimistic about the news, and they hope that this happens as quickly as possible. It's nice to hear that resolution happened. I mean, listen, it permeates every conversation that we have in this city about every aspect of life. When something like this happens, chances are you are less likely to have the funds to fix it yourself these days. So if the city's going to come in and fix the problem that they created, good on them. And we are hopeful that this gets resolved to the satisfaction of this couple. Jody, do we have our next guest? We do indeed. We're going to bring in somebody who knows far more about real estate than I do. Davelle Morrison, broker with Bosley Real Estate Limited. Davelle, good morning. Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday to you too, Ben. Yeah, that's a pretty crazy story, and crazy that they really expected this couple to pay for it themselves. I mean, it's great that the city's now going to pay for it, but now my question is, how long is it going to take them to fix it?
Yeah.
Because I live in Midtown Toronto, and I see how long it's taken them to do the Eglinton LRT.
Well, yeah, part of me thinks that it's just standard operating procedure for them to say something like that, where you've got to absorb the cost, and then when all of a sudden there's a groundswell of support either on social media or in traditional media, they maybe take a different tactic. But you've got a couple of interesting stories for us. I didn't know, Davelle, that there's an official definition of what constitutes a buyer's market. But apparently we're now officially in a buyer's market. So what makes a market officially a buyer's market?
Yeah. So, I mean, there is a stat with a sales to new listings ratio.
Okay.
And so now that we have come across that particular threshold, it is now officially a buyer's market out there. And, the number of sales that we've seen in September has been the lowest number of sales that we've seen in many, many years. And, I see it in the market. I'm seeing lots of terminated listings. I'm seeing lots of, here's the new vocabulary for everybody out there, price improvements instead of reductions.
That's nice.
Sometimes I gotta love real estate speak.
Well, I follow a lot of accounts on Instagram that compare what you can get in Toronto versus the castles that you can get in Europe. And there's a lot of them. Does this mean that we may be getting back to a more normal bang for your buck?
No, don't kid yourself.
Okay.
Our city's expensive. Our city's expensive and it's not going anywhere. And, yes, it's a buyer's market, but things aren't being sold at like 50% off.
Okay.
It's not. It's not an IKEA start the car moment.
Oh,
Look, it's
still the best commercial that's ever been made. Ever. It's the best, most perfect commercial that anyone has ever put on any platform. And I will die on that hill. Start the car for IKEA is the greatest commercial that I have ever seen and will ever see. I don't care about the Super Bowl commercials. This one takes the cake. I apologize for derailing us, but it was a flood of emotion, and I'm very passionate about that commercial.
Yeah, I love it. And so when I'm talking to clients and I'm like, you need to get this house, I'm like, this is your IKEA start the car moment. Like, it's not going to come around again. Do it now.
Yep.
Anyway.
But all of these things are interrelated, right? The cost of a house and why people want to sell has a lot to do with a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is rising mortgage costs. It's just too expensive for some people to keep the houses that they thought they'd keep forever.
Well, and I mean, everybody's different. Not everybody's moving because they can no longer afford the mortgage payments. There's definitely some of that out there in the marketplace. I'm definitely seeing more power of listings, power of sales. So there is that element, but there's also the element of people are just making a regular change in their lives that they would always make.
So
Right.
yeah,
So
yeah, exactly.
it's the,
Let's talk though about like the mortgage payment shock with like higher for longer rates.
sure. Yeah. So, I mean, right now we know that 20% of mortgages renew every single
Yeah.
year. But the overall default rate on mortgages in Canada is still very low. We're talking about less than 2% of people are defaulting on their mortgages. Now, that being said, when some people are going to get their new mortgages at these current rates, they're facing an increase of over 40% in their payments.
That's
And
I mean,
that's a ton.
for people who budget, Davelle, for people who
Yeah.
budget long term because they know that they have to make their money work for them. This is a big wrench in the gears.
Absolutely. And it's going to cause people to curtail their spending on other
Yep.
things. There was already that recent stat that Open Table did that said that restaurant reservations are down drastically. So that's where we're going to see it. We're going to see it first and foremost in the restaurant industry. Now in Toronto, you're finally going to be able to get a reservation somewhere.
Davelle, before we let you go and let you enjoy your weekend, your Thanksgiving weekend, when there are people like yourselves who do one thing and do it very, very well, and every time I meet them, they'll tell me stories about that I would never know otherwise. You must have crazy stories about Toronto real estate. What is the craziest story that you're sitting on right now?
Well, it's funny. I guess I don't feel like I have crazy stories, but I'm always amazed by how much some of the houses in the city cost. I was recently checking out, what are the most expensive houses in the city?
Uh
And
huh.
the most expensive house in the city is priced at 28 million. And, no shock, it's located in the Bridle Path. Now, I always love driving through the Bridle Path because I'm sort of mesmerized by the size of these houses because they're crazy big. I mean, some of these houses have 8 and 9 bedrooms,
Yeah.
but what's interesting is that the people who live in there. So yes, we know that Drake's got a house there, but what is interesting is one of my colleagues recently sold Gordon Lightfoot's house.
Really?
And Gordon Lightfoot's house is kitty corner to Drake's house.
Interesting. My kids used to go to day camp just around the corner from Drake's house. You had to drive down his street, take a right, go down into this ravine, and they would go to day camp there. And every day I would pick them up. It worked really well with my schedule. And one day I'm on my way to pick them up, and it's bumper to bumper traffic on this street. I'm like, what is going on? I'm getting pretty angry. So there better be a fire down there or something, not at the camp, obviously. But it turns out the traffic was because there were so many little girls doing TikToks in front of Drake's house, and you could see the very annoyed faces of the fathers holding up the phones. Yeah, and so maybe all of this was happening on Gordon Lightfoot's property, which is so who knows. But Davelle, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thanks, you too.
All right, Jody, what's coming up next?
We're going to talk to Arlene Bynap this break.
All right, don't go anywhere. Toronto This Weekend will be back after this.